Even though presidential candidates are no longer shaking hands and kissing babies, the race for the White House hasn't stopped. Trump campaign is now reaching voters online.
The campaign, like its leader, President Trump, has 1 year, and that is forward.
Hey everybody.
Buenas noches.
Hello and welcome.
Hi everyone. We have the best data in the country. We have the best infrastructure laid out. And so now we get to capitalize on that data, on this infrastructure, to take our events online to the American public.
You might not see anyone going door to door. Those same volunteers are now making campaign calls from home.
While President Trump is focused on the health and safety of the American people, we here at the campaign are committed to defeating the Democrats, and how all of you at home can help us and join in this fight.
Its online campaign reached more than 1 million viewers.
It really is new age campaigning.
Just let's realize how good Donald Trump's political operation is.
The Trump organization has a well-documented, robust online infrastructure, what they call their Trump army.
Tonight, I am honored to launch Catholics for Trump Coalition.
And welcome to our very first Black Voices for Trump online broadcast.
How can women stay engaged and informed?
I could not feel more proud about this country.
President Trump has done about everything that you can do.
The Biden's record on notable job-killing trade deals.
I'm supporting NAFTA.
We're so fortunate to have a wartime president to lead us through this global challenge.
And we're going to get through it.
And we are going to keep America great.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mercedes Schlappen. I'm Senior Advisor for the Trump-Pence campaign, and welcome to Women in Power Hour. And I am so honored to have two of my favorite friends on our show tonight, especially these are two great patriots. Pam Bondi, former Florida Attorney General and one of our staunch defenders of the president during the impeachment sham. Welcome, Pam.
Thank you.
And of course, our wonderful senator from the great state of Tennessee, Senator Marsha Blackburn. Senator, it's such an honor to have you on our show tonight.
It's so good to be with you. Thank you so much.
So we thought we'd take the opportunity today to first talk about, obviously, the crisis at hand, the coronavirus, which we know has impacted all of our lives, all of our families, our communities. And so I want to first start with you, Senator. What are you seeing in Tennessee in terms of what the president, what he's been able to focus on, what he's been able to do in working in conjunction with state and local officials to ensure that the people in Tennessee are safe and staying healthy?
You know, the people in Tennessee are so supportive of the president, and they've really appreciated the leadership that he has brought to bear. And I cannot tell you the number of times people have said, I'm so pleased we had this robust economy, that we had brought ourselves back to economic health. And one of the things they continue to talk about is having this be a very short recession. And they know the president had a rescue plan. They know that he has a recovery plan, and they are following the CDC guidance. They're staying at home. Our churches are streaming services. People are doing a lot of ordering online and monitoring their trips to the grocery store, wearing eye coverings, gloves, and masks. And we even have some wonderful women who are making masks. And you'll see these out there becoming quite a trendy item.
Yeah, it is a change of lifestyle to a certain extent and of behavior for Americans, but I do think, as the president has mentioned, he's talked about our economy being artificially interrupted because of the coronavirus. But the fact is that he is very much focused on reopening this economy. It's one of the reasons why he's putting together these groups of thought leaders, industry leaders, to say, how do we get the economy work going, get our workers back in their jobs, and again, make sure that our economy grows again. So Pam, to you, what are you seeing in Florida? You know, obviously we know with Florida, there's a lot of the tourism industry, which is impacted by this, service industries. What are you seeing in terms of how the president is working not only with the state and local officials, but he's also been able to create these innovative partnerships with private industry?
And Mercedes, you're right. In Florida, the president has been such a role model, working not only with our governors, our state and local officers, all of our sheriffs. You know, we're 22 million people almost. We're the third largest state in the country. And for the president to be doing such a good job, and all the private partnerships that he's formed to help all of our citizens, has really been amazing. You know, and just what he's doing with Steve Mnuchin, our neighbor, applied. He was scared to death he could lose his business. He has 90 plus employees and it's a media business. So he shut down. He received his PPP check already and it's going to be forgiven in 4 days. He's able to stay employed. He's able to keep his employees. So, you know, we're doing remarkable things in Florida. And as Senator Blackburn just said, you're seeing people social distancing at Trader Joe's. There's a line outside and people don't mind. You're 10 feet apart and they're only letting a certain amount of people in the store at a time. Neighbors are all calling and checking on each other. It's like in the old days. People are looking out for each other. Families are looking out for each other. I think the only guy happy about the socially distance is my little rescue dog here, who I think is loving this homebound stuff. Aren't you, Brody? This is Brody. But it's actually going well. We need to get our economy back up and running. And Governor DeSantis is committed to working with the president, and so are all of our sheriffs. And you know what? Our mayors, Democrat and Republican alike, it's a team effort. And you know, we got to thank everybody out there for just following the rules and listening to the vice president.
Pam, you gotta mention the Brody collar, like the dog. There's a story behind that. We gotta let our viewers know.
All right, so Brody is wearing a hero dog collar in honor of Conan, and the president gave this to him after Conan was in the White House, and it's in honor of Conan, and it's hero dog. That, of course, Conan, who helped take out al-Baghdadi, one of the worst terrorists in our history, was honored in the White House, and my little rescue dog is very honored to be honoring Conan every day. It's gone to his head, I think, a little bit, but yeah.
Mercy, I want to add something to what Pam was talking about with the partnerships, the public-private partnerships. This is something that people have commented about appreciating so much what the president has done. When you realize that there is a bureaucratic process that slows down decision making, and it doesn't matter if it's the CDC or the FDA or the NIH or any number of the agencies. What the president did was, when there was not a clearly defined process, instead of waiting for committees to meet, he called together the public and the private sector, and he said, we have a pandemic, we have a crisis that is coming, we need to find solutions. And because of that determination and that focused leadership, look at how it is helping us. We grieve every life that is lost, and we know people are suffering with loss of livelihood, but we also know that we are going to suffer a much shorter time than many countries because of the leadership that was brought to the table immediately. And people really comment about how much they appreciate this different approach that didn't put government first, it put people first.
Right, and it's left, that's a great point. And I think when you look at Biden in the basement, Biden is spending so much time being so critical of this president, where he's making comments that actually don't even make sense. Pam, I go to you on this. So when you're looking at Biden and you're saying, oh my goodness, this is the Democrat nominee. We just had Elizabeth Warren be the last person standing to finally endorse Joe Biden after being incredibly critical of Joe Biden. I mean, what are the Democrat Party? What's their proposal in helping to resolve this issue about the virus, and as well as defeat the invisible enemy, as the president says, and as well as restart this economy?
I don't think they have one. And I think that's why Elizabeth Warren was so late to endorse Joe Biden. And look at when Barack Obama endorsed him, the last person to endorse his own vice president. And there's good reason. You know, Marcia and I heard during the impeachment trial, we talked a lot about the Ukraine dealings that Hunter Biden did while his father was vice president. And frankly, how dare Joe Biden even call the president any derogatory name in regard to China, when in 2013, as NBC reported, Joe Biden went to China on Air Force Two, and who went along? Hunter Biden. And why did they say that he was going on a social visit to China? It wasn't a social visit. We later learned, NBC later learned, that China had already had an application from Hunter Biden prior to that trip to do business there. The Obama White House said, you know what they said? Oh, it was a social visit. We did not know. Later, they said, we did not know that Hunter Biden was conducting official business there on behalf, private business, and he sure was. Because here's what we know. He's having meetings. He flies there on Air Force Two with his father, says it's social, says he's getting ice cream, going to dinner. That's what he's telling the media. When in fact, he's having business meetings. Not only that, there's this Chinese banker, Jonathan Lee, a billionaire, who Hunter arranges to shake hands, have a photo op with his father on this trip in a hotel lobby. Then lo and behold, 10 days later, what happens? Hunter Biden goes on this board, shock. And this board is 80% Chinese, 80%. Hunter Biden's percentage, 10%. Come on. And
yeah,
you know what the company says? Mercy, the company says, oh, we want to become more international. We need more foreign partners. So they take on Hunter Biden? Really? This guy knows a whole lot about doing business in China. And the Wall Street Journal reported it as well. It's unbelievable. And he said he committed that he was going to leave this board in October. Well, records show, guess who's still on the board? Hunter Biden.
That's right. And I mean, we should just call him Ambassador Hunter Biden to China. But I think
and the Ukraine.
Adding to Pam, what Pam was saying, it was a Daily Caller story just came out. Newly uncovered business records show that Hunter Biden is still listed as a board member of the Chinese company he pledged to resign from in October. Senator Marsha Blackburn, where do we go from here? I mean, we know these Democrats are not holding China accountable on a number of issues, including the pandemic. And obviously, Hunter Biden is stuck in this mix. And where is Joe Biden to tell his son, you got to get off the board. You got to, you know, if you want me to run for president, just get out of my business. That's obviously not happening.
Very true. And, you know, what we know is that it is Biden Incorporated. And Hunter is the biggest offender, but you have the rest of the family that is involved in this enterprise of going for government contracts and things of that nature. So we know that has been their focus. We also know, and this is another thing Joe Biden likes to say, oh, Donald Trump shouldn't have done the travel ban. Thank goodness Donald Trump did the travel ban. President Trump has helped to save a lot of lives by banning travel from China early. Impeachment was going on, everything else. He was focused on protecting the American people doing his job. Now, when Joe Biden was vice president, he could have said, let's build the national stockpile that was put in place by President Clinton, that was bolstered and more than doubled in size by President Bush. But look what happened during the Obama-Biden years. That stockpile was really not increased in the manner that it should have been increased. You know bad things are going to happen. You plan for them. That is why our states have rainy day funds. It is why our families set aside a savings account. And it's why our federal government should have stockpiles of drugs, stockpiles of ventilators, and PPE. Here's another thing. We know that most of our pharmaceutical production has moved offshore. Why did so much of it move offshore during the Obama-Biden years? It moved offshore because of regulations that were heaped on these companies by the EPA, that were heaped on them tax policy that was unfriendly to business, other things from the FDA or the NIH, but it made it advantageous to what? Do your manufacturing in China. And also we look at this from a policy end, and we say with the Democrats at large, Senate Resolution 553, I have it in the Senate, and Congressman Jim Banks has it in the House. Well, Congressman Banks filed this resolution to hold China accountable, showing that we, Congress, recognize that China lied about the virus. They withheld the information. They tried to blame it on the military. They have ousted reporters from China, and they're trying to go in and sanitize all of the communication around the Wuhan labs. Well, there was one Democrat that had come on this until Nancy Pelosi talked to him, and guess what? The Democrat came off the resolution to hold China accountable. China started this. China needs to help clean it up. China needs to pay for it. And the Democrats need to be working with us, not parroting some of the things that are coming from the Chinese Communist Party, that it's not China's fault. We all need to work together to clean this situation up. And we welcome our colleagues across the aisle to join us in holding them accountable and in pushing back on rhetoric that China is pushing into the mainstream media in this country. The U.S. military didn't start this. American scientists didn't start this. It started in Wuhan, China.
Yeah, and there's no question that there is this love affair between Joe Biden, the Democrats, and China, and which we have seen for quite some time. This has been a great discussion. We're going to continue this discussion, but first we have to go to a commercial break.
Ready to go?
This is a crisis.
This is no time for Donald Trump's record of hysterical xenophobia.
Biden's son inked a $1 billion deal with a subsidiary of the Bank of China.
China is going to eat our lunch? Come on, man. They're not bad folks.
Since the outbreak, the Communist Party has been mobilizing overseas organizations to buy local supplies and send them to China.
It is in our self-interest that China continue to prosper. What a beautiful history we wrote together. Banning all travel will not stop it.
The president is right. The travel restriction on China, as every public health official we've talked to said, bought the country time.
That was a very smart move right there.
Hysterical xenophobia. Xenophobia. I complimented him on dealing with China. I'm not going nuts.
Welcome back to Women in Power Hour with our special guest, former Attorney General of Florida, Pam Bondi, and our great senator from Tennessee, Senator Marsha Blackburn. Thank you both for being with us. We've been having a very lively discussion on Biden's coziness with China, and that's not only Joe, but Hunter as well. And let's just start from there. In January 2020, Joe Biden said we should be helping China. In 2001, Biden said China is not our enemy. I mean, this is very revealing coming from Biden, the globalist, Biden, the establishment, stale politician from Washington, D.C., who is focused on helping China while the president is focused on helping American workers here and negotiating better deals. You look at the trade deals, it was Joe Biden who supported TPP. It was Joe Biden who supported NAFTA. President Trump, he's changed the game on trade deals, making it more favorable for American workers and our farmers. Senator Blackburn, to you, where do you think that Joe Biden is just in a weakened position to lead America, especially when it comes to dealing with our relationship with other countries, including China?
Yes, and Mercy, you just hit it perfectly. A globalist mentality. And this is one of the things we saw in the campaign in 2016, that the American people responded to President Trump and to his message. They knew China was a problem, and they appreciated that here was a candidate that stood up and said, you see these guys over here, China, they're taking our intellectual property. They're stealing from us. They're taking our jobs. And now we can say, look at what they sent us. They sent us a virus. They are pushing this forward. And one of the things that interested me, a couple of weeks ago, I spent some time talking to different activists in China, and we set up phone calls with them. They know that the Wuhan lab knew for 51 days they had an outbreak. 51 days. And they concealed it because they didn't want to interfere with the Communist Party leadership coming to Wuhan to celebrate the Chinese New Year. And all of this has now been documented. Yesterday, the Washington Post had an article out, Josh Rogan wrote it, about this may have originated in the Wuhan lab. Now, here is where there's a problem for Joe Biden. The concerns over security at the Wuhan lab goes back to when? 2014. Who was in the White House in 2014, 2015, 2016? Who was reading the cables? There were cables that went over in 2018. Why was the response from the Trump administration as quick as it was? In 2018, they started getting this information, increasing the monitoring. The Chinese knew we had concerns. Those concerns were not addressed, and then China tried to hide this. Now, our Democrat colleagues need to meet us. We're always willing to have a conversation to protect the American people, as is this president. Pam has seen it firsthand. Being over there in the West Wing, Mercy, you have seen it firsthand. He is going to put the people first. And this is why people appreciate his approach to dealing with these issues.
Yes, and to that point, Pam, I mean, you've seen him in action. You were with him during one of the most difficult periods of the presidency. And of course, as we know, just knowing the president, he always rises to the occasion. He fights harder than anybody else. How do you think, as we move and we get through this crisis, rebuild the economy, why is President Trump the right man for this moment?
There's no one else in this world who could be doing what Donald Trump's doing now to save our country and to save our world. Do you think Joe Biden would have shut down China, like Marcia just said? Never.
No.
And watching him while they are trying to impeach a sitting American president, the president is behind closed doors working every day tirelessly. I don't know how the man does it for our country nonstop. He had all the airlines come in. He shut down China. Everything he's been doing. Look at these press conferences he's holding every day. Have you ever seen another American president in our history do anything like Donald Trump? Taking questions from everyone, the tough ones, the easy ones, the mostly fake ones. He's taking all those questions and he's throwing them right back at him with the real facts based on the experts. And look at Mike Pence. Look at our great vice president. Everything VP Pence is doing every day. They're not getting any sleep. They are working around the clock. And where's Joe Biden? Probably in his basement right now, helping Hunter Biden out some more.
I want to get like a wood carving for Biden's basement and send it to him. Biden's basement. That's like his version of how close he's going to get to the White House.
Right.
But let me ask you, Senator, we've seen obviously the president yesterday talked about the World Health Organization, how he's moving to pool funding for the World Health Organization. You know, obviously you have the globalists who are having a complete, how can I say, meltdown. So why is this the right move? Why is this a time that we need to look at the World Health Organization and say, you guys made a lot of the mistakes, you know, we got to pull the funding?
Well, we should be pulling the funding. And yes, indeed, they did make a lot of serious mistakes. And they also have politicized the warnings that they are giving, saying China was transparent, praising China for being transparent, When China lied, they hid the information, they would not give the CDC the viral sample to begin the work. On February 27th, we said there is an active pharmaceutical ingredient we may need to test for a vaccine for COVID-19. They said, we may not give it to you because China is the sole source. This is why we need to bring all this pharmaceutical manufacturing back. And some of my colleagues have joined me in my push. I've been working on this, bringing pharmaceutical manufacturing back for a really long time. And they have joined me in saying, let's look at other supply chains, whether it's automobiles, whether it is energy, whether it is electronics, and let's rebuild sustainability in these supply lines. I said, let's do it. And then let's call our bill the Mama Act. Make America manufacture again. Make us mamas happy. And it ties right into Make America Great Again.
Right.
And I think that this is a focus of the president's, is to say these organizations are not fair to us, whether it's the UN, and can you even believe that China wants a seat on the Human Rights Council in the UN? I mean, this is unbelievable. And the World Health Organization, if they are not going to give out truthful information, and if they become a political organization, they do not deserve one dime of U.S. taxpayer money. And every dollar the federal government has to send somewhere around the globe, it is coming out of your pocket. And I heard from so many Tennesseans yesterday that said, praise the Lord, Donald Trump is standing up to these globalist organizations that don't even like us. Thank goodness.
That's absolutely right. The president's mentality is America first, and it's what the mamas are all grateful for. It's why we love Donald Trump. But we're going to take another commercial break. This is actually one of my favorite commercials. It's the Alice Johnson Super Bowl ad. We want you all to watch, and then we'll get some reaction from Senator Blackburn and Pam Bondi. Thank you.
I'm free to hug my family. I'm free to start over. This is the greatest day of my life. My heart is just bursting with gratitude. I want to thank President Donald John Trump. Woo! Thank you.
I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message.
Welcome back to Women in Power Hour with our two special guests, Pam Bondi and Senator Marsha Blackburn. Ladies, I love that commercial. I just know this wonderful story of Alice Johnson and her experience with the president. Pam, tell me your reaction to the commercial. And also, you actually have just a personal experience with that of the work that the president's done with criminal justice reform.
I do. And, you know, when I was Attorney General, the president and Jared Kushner asked me to sit on the committee for the First Step Act. So I did that. Then when I was in the White House, I was blessed to stay and help work on pardons with the president and with Jared and Brooke Rollins and, you know, and Pat Cipollone. And I got to know Alice Johnson. She is a remarkable woman. And, you know, I say these are nameless women who would have been overlooked. And I was with the president and Jared and Pat Cipollone and all the great people in the White House. When he had a private meeting, he had Alice Johnson come in, he had Crystal Muniz come in, he had Tyneese Hall come in, he had Judith Negron come in. These are women who you would have never heard of, but for they were serving these excessive sentences. It was crazy. These are mothers. They were in prison they wouldn't have been out, one of them, for 20 more years. And thanks to President Trump, you know what when most presidents do this? After the election.
That's right.
I don't care. I'm doing what's right. And he always does what's right. And he commuted their sentences. These three women and Alice are out of prison where they should be. They're home with their families and they are doing great. I've gotten to know all of them, as well as many of us. When I was in the White House, we got to know them. And President had them, no president does this. He had them come in the Oval Office, these women, and sit down with him for a very private, not going to repeat the conversation, but a very moving personal conversation with these women, and he saw what an impact he's had on their lives and their children's lives. That's the kind of man that the three of us all know and love. That's the man that should be in the White House and will remain in the White House.
And Joe Biden was one who supported mass incarceration. The policies he supported obviously led to so much of this unfair sentencing. And there was really a need for there to be significant change in our sentencing reform. And that's why passing the First Step Act really allowed to deal with these non-violent offenders and get them to a place where it would be beneficial, for men and women. But we saw in particular with these women who have had really not great conditions in some of our prisons, which I think has been very, very difficult. Senator Blackburn, I want to ask you, you spent some time with the president in Tennessee after the tornadoes that struck your state, and obviously lives were lost. It was a very tragic time for your state. Walk us through how the president interacted with the families there, and what impression did he leave you?
Oh, my goodness. He was absolutely so wonderful. After I was on the ground with the tornadoes, I talked to the president that night, and I said, I really think that you should come. The loss of life, we had one neighborhood that was completely flattened. There were 8 individuals that lost their lives in this community. And we walked into that neighborhood amid all the rubble. And he talked to every single one of those families right in that neighborhood. It was phenomenal, and it was cold, and it was blustery, but they were out there. He was out there with them. When they would ask a question, he would turn to somebody and say, where do we get that answer? And he would put somebody on it right then. And that's one of the differences that I think people have seen in the leadership of Donald Trump. He doesn't delegate something to be done later on or to be followed up on later on. He turns to somebody right there and he says, let's fix this. Let's get a response for this. Let's start the wheels moving on this. And that is the difference of having somebody that's going to put people first and somebody that is going to take a typical government response. He is, let's do it. When I was growing up, my dad had this coin. It was a round coin, and it had a "to-it" on it, the number 2 and the word "it." And he would always say, if I started to procrastinate, he would say, you need to get around to it. He would just hold that coin out and show it to me to remind me to get myself in gear and get it done. I think that looking at Donald Trump, a lot of these individuals in federal agencies just see the "to-it" sign. They know they better go get the job done because there is a different expectation, and his is done from a position of compassion, of caring deeply about what these individuals are facing.
Right.
Right. I have a coin, and my coin says "no mercy," but that's my coin. It reminds me. But Pam, you've also had an experience with the president. I think one of the things I'm sure you all get all the time, which is women come up to you and they're like, how can you support, President Trump? And they kind of give you that look of, how can women support him? And I'm always like, there are so many women out there who do support him because they see this man who gets it done. Mm-hmm. And so, but there is a side to the president that I think the media really rarely ever captures. And that's when he does call, for example, the family of like a military family where a loved one was lost. You have an experience, I think, that happened just recently. And can you share that story with us?
Yeah, I will. And I wouldn't have, but the family has chosen to share it. And they've reported it in the news locally. In Jacksonville, Florida, the little boy named Jacob, terminal leukemia. And Jacob all these kids are so special, but Jacob knew he was dying. And it was 93% through his body. And he chose to go home, 15 years old, and live out his last days with his parents and his beautiful sisters. And I've gotten to be friends with Gracie now, his sister and his parents and his dad. His dad was in Bahrain fighting for our country in the Navy when Jacob was diagnosed in 2018. The Navy was great. They sent Mark home to be with his wife, to be with Jacob. Jacob was a school mascot. Jacob, when he found out he was dying, this was last week, Jacob started calling all the other oncology kids who he had been in the hospital with and in a great group called Dreams Come True, calling them saying, I'm going to heaven, but you're going to be okay. You're going to beat this. You're great. You're a winner. You're going to win this. He called his high school coach and told the coach what they need to look for in the next school mascot. Wow. So I was telling the president this story. We didn't know how long Jacob would live. No other person would do this. And this is while the president is fighting coronavirus. He has maybe, 5 minutes of his own time, maybe a day in a 24-hour day. The president from the resident said, what's Jacob's number? He called Jacob, and I won't share their private conversation, but the parents have said, of course, that Jacob said the president told him he's a legend, and he asked Jacob to look over all of us, because Jacob had said Jacob was just baptized again prior to the phone call from the president, and he was just baptized again. And Jacob told the president that he'll look over all of us. And then after the president's call, this is what a remarkable young man Jacob was. There were hundreds of cars and police cars, and they did a farewell tour in front of Jacob's house. A parade of cars, because of social distancing, went by Jacob's house. But when Jacob hung up the phone, he had said, the only thing on my bucket list before, he said, I didn't get to talk to the president, but the president knows I love him. And sure enough, he got to talk to the president. When he hung up, he said, this is the best day of my life. And Jacob died at 12:04 a.m. on Easter Sunday. But a president doing something like that without hesitation, with no time to do it, making that phone call. And then he sent Jacob something also that he wanted him to have, but before he went to heaven. But we now have an angel looking over all of us. And that's the man that the three of us know. And his kindness, his warmth, not only for individuals, but for our entire country. And we see how President Trump is with our military, our first responders, and how much he cares, and what a great father and husband he is too. That's the man that at this time there should be no other president in the world other than Donald Trump, and we are so blessed to have him.
Well, we pray for Jacob. We pray for his family. That is truly a remarkable story. It's the man I know and the man I had the honor to work with in the White House and now representing in the campaign. And I just want to close by, what message do you have for women who are trying to figure out, okay, we have this election coming up. We have to keep our eyes on the ball here. We got to make sure we win in November, because if not, the country will dramatically change. So, Senator Blackburn, let me start with you. What message do you have for women who are on the fence about why should I support President Donald J. Trump?
Well, our focus should be on how do we keep our country safe? How do we bring it back to productivity? How do we make certain that we can do what Reagan always instructed us to do? To protect freedom, because we don't get it through the bloodstream. Every single generation has to fight for it and protect it. That is why you have to make certain that we properly respond with this coronavirus. We hold China accountable. It's why we have to look at these organizations, global organizations, and if they're not treating us fairly, hold them accountable. It's why we have to move our economy back to the most robust economy we had in decades and decades, which is what we got with the Trump tax cuts. These are all things that have made a difference. So when I talk with women, I tell them, look, you probably tilt center right on most issues. And when you think about it that way, who are you going to line up with most often? It is going to be lining up with what Donald Trump has done in his administration and what he will do to make certain we're preserving freedom for future generations. I say there's the big five: faith, family, freedom, hope, and opportunity. And he is going to get every one of those right every single time.
Amen. And we know, Pam, Florida is a critical state. It's important that we win Florida. How are we going to get it to the finish line to ensure that Donald Trump wins the state of Florida?
Well, I think people are seeing, as Marcia just said, what the president's been doing and when our economy was at its best. Look at the paid medical leave, the family leave that Ivanka Trump spearheaded. Look at that. No other president's done anything like that to help women, to help families. Look at how great our unemployment rate was before coronavirus hit. As a prosecutor, I'm all about safety, keeping our communities safe, supporting our great men and women in law enforcement, our first responders. They all know that. They see what President Trump does every day. But also, the president now, one of the most telling things I think he said, I built our economy up once and I'm ready to do it again. He's going to do it again.
That's right.
And Steve Mnuchin and Vice President Pence and Peter Navarro, our economy is going to get back stronger than ever because of him. He did it once and he's going to do it again. And it would scare me to death to have anyone else in that White House other than Donald Trump.
That's right. And I just want to thank both of you for joining us. This was a really wonderful discussion. I mean, goodness, the Jacob story, brought me to tears. And it just reminds you how really it is about family. It is about faith in this country. And it is about great leadership under President Trump. And you two are such great patriots. And you inspire my girls and so many women out there to speak up, stand strong, and defend this president. So we thank you both for your service and all that you have done for this country and to help President Donald J. Trump. And for those of you who are viewing tonight, we want you to stay involved. Remember, we have this election coming up in November. We need our volunteers. If you want to volunteer, if you want to make calls from home, get activated, be part of the movement. Go to armyfortrump.com. And also a great way to stay connected is to text Trump at 88022. And we want you all to be part of this. I have to tell you, in working for two presidents, President Trump is just the most dynamic president I've ever worked for. And we have so much work to do, and we cannot afford to lose America. We cannot afford to lose our freedoms. And we know that that is what Joe Biden would offer to America, which is that of embracing the far less socialist agenda of Bernie Sanders, as he has committed to do. So with that, please join us, be part of this great movement, and keep watching Team Trump online every night as we continue to make sure that you all stay safe, but stay connected to our Trump-Pence campaign. Thank you, good night, and God bless America.
America is being threatened by an invisible but deadly enemy. President Trump is leading an unprecedented response to this threat, making the tough call early by banning travel from China and coronavirus epicenters, declaring a national emergency, mobilizing scientists, doctors, and nurses to treat patients and find a cure, testing more people than any other country, investing billions of dollars to help develop a vaccine. And President Trump is putting American workers and families first by increasing unemployment insurance, providing paid sick leave, fighting for direct checks to families, and helping small businesses survive. Together, we will defeat this pandemic and emerge safer, stronger, and healthier than ever. Because we are America, the greatest country on earth.
I'm Donald J. Trump, and I approve this message.